I would like to welcome everybody here to our Defense Committee look at the supplementary estimates Bravo for FY 16-17. I want to thank the Minister of National Defense, the Honourable Harjit Sajjan, for coming today. And there's a whole host of people here to support him. I'm not going to run through the lineup because it's long and we have a limited amount of time, but I would ask if you are supporting the Minister later with questions, if you could just state your name and what department you're from. That would be helpful for people that are trying to keep track of what we're doing here. So, having said that, Minister, thank you for coming, and you have the floor.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Yes, I have to come with a very large team. We as you know, National Defense is just a small little organization, right? And it just to making sure that we can answer all of the questions thoroughly for it. So I'm pleased to be here today to discuss the Department of National Defense's Supplementary Estimates B. Around this time last year, I began the job as Minister of National Defense, and it's been a privilege every single day to serve in this role. My mandate letter from the Prime Minister clearly stated that a top priority is to ensure that our women and men in uniform have the equipment that they need. The work that we ask them to do is difficult. Supporting our service members requires not only investments into the right equipment and infrastructure, but a dedication and a commitment to them and their families as well. Family members trust that we are acting in their loved ones' best interests when we make decisions about resources, and I take that trust extremely seriously. The cost to fulfill that trust can fluctuate over time, but I assure you that we are always mindful of our responsibilities as stewards of the public purse when we determine, define, and redefine those costs throughout the year and every year. Today, I would like to do two things. First and foremost, I would like to explain the need for additional funding for the Canadian Armed Forces, its members, and missions. But I would also like to paint a picture of DND's commitment and dedication to responsible spending. Today also represents an opportunity for me to demonstrate how DND is advancing the government's commitments. We continue to build on the government's priorities, and we operate within a whole-of-government construct, working side by side with other departments and agencies in an extremely complex budgetary environment. Today, I would like to specifically highlight how we are addressing the crisis in Iraq and Syria, investing in infrastructure, protecting the environment, and investing in the Royal Canadian Navy. Allow me to begin with the big picture and the Department of National Defense Supplementary Estimates B. In total, the Department has requested new funding of $257.8 million. Once we account for transfers to other departments, DND's total budgetary authority for the fiscal year becomes $19.3 billion. As I will explain, the additional funds being requested are primarily investments toward defense infrastructure, environmental remediation, and support for expeditionary operations. On that note, I will start with the largest of the items, and that is the additional funding needed for Operation Impact. This operation is our military contribution to the international coalition that is fighting Daesh in Iraq and in Syria. We refocused and enhanced our contribution to the mission earlier this year in reaction to an evolved situation on the ground. The Canadian Armed Forces continue to conduct air operations using Polaris aerial refuelers and Aurora reconnaissance aircraft. A detachment of up to 4 Griffin helicopters has been added and is supporting the transportation of personnel and equipment. It has also become increasingly clear that a combination of security, diplomacy, humanitarian assistance, and development is required to counter the threat posed by Daesh. We have placed additional emphasis on advising and assisting Iraqi security forces in their efforts to dismantle and defeat this threat. Additional military resources were also dedicated to supporting the coalition with intelligence and headquarters personnel. Through Supplementary Estimates B, the Department of National Defense has requested $147.1 million in additional funding for Operation Impact for 2016-2017. This money will be used primarily for regular and reserve force members' salaries and benefits, as well as for vehicles and other equipment that directly supports Canada's success on Operation Impact and our commitment to help the Iraqi security forces defeat Daesh. Our commitment to the success of our troops on missions abroad is clear, but so too is our commitment to our service members as they live, train, and work back here at home. The second largest category of additional funding we are seeking today is defense infrastructure. DND has the largest and most complex real property portfolio in the federal government, It is responsible for approximately 20,000 buildings and land covering approximately 2.2 million hectares of land, which is roughly the four times the size of Prince Edward Island. We are requesting an additional $36.4 million to help maintain and upgrade federal infrastructure assets. That infrastructure is of critical importance for our women and men in uniform, so we have a great responsibility to maintain and improve it. I can't emphasize enough how investing in infrastructure is an investment in good jobs for civilians in communities across Canada. The funds requested in this item will be used in several ways. We will finance projects such as defense infrastructure in the north. We will repair airfield hangars, jetties, and other infrastructure at our wings and bases in the rest of Canada. Eventually, though, when real estate is no longer of strategic value, it then needs to be sold or disposed. For that reason, DND is also seeking to reinvest $19.5 million from the sales and transfers of defense properties. Strategic real property disposals are another way that DND is supporting the government's commitment to improving military infrastructure across the country. Building and maintaining infrastructure is important to us for all the reasons I've talked about, but caring for the environment as we do that is also equally important. The Government of Canada, including the National Defence, is committed to protecting the environment. We always aim to be responsible in the way we assess, manage, and remediate federal contaminated sites. That is why we have requested $22.1 million from phase 3 of the Federal Contaminated Sites Action Plan. With these funds, we hope to reduce DND's contaminated sites liability and minimize environmental and human health risks. The remediation projects taking place in Esquimalt Harbor in British Columbia and 5 Wing Goose Bay in Newfoundland are at the top of the list to receive this funding. The department will continue to address environmental legacy issues and invest heavily in the decontamination of these sites. I would like to move from land to sea now. We know that the government is committed to strengthening the Royal Canadian Navy. It is no secret that the Navy needs an at-sea supply capability as soon as possible. The contract in place to develop an interim solution will fill the gap until the more robust joint support ships enter into service in 2021 and 2022. The interim auxiliary oiler replenishment ship will also provide capabilities such as at-sea oil replenishment, aviation support, humanitarian assistance, or disaster relief. DND is requesting an additional $22 million for pre-delivery service payments related to this contract. This request supports DND's mandate and commitment to working with Public Service and Procurement Canada to strengthen the Navy, and it will help grow the economy and create jobs at the same time. Today's estimates also include additional funding for other low-cost items. These include the improvement of security for military operations and personnel, smaller projects on bases and properties, and in investments of intellectual property royalties as well. As I mentioned earlier, the overall estimates also include transfers to and from other government organizations. The most significant transfer is $5.9 million to the Communication Security Establishment for their support to military operations, all of which again directly support the priorities of both the Government of Canada and the Canadian Armed Forces. So in closing, Mr. Chair, I hope that I have painted a picture of our commitment, a commitment to Canadians, a commitment to responsible spending, and a commitment to the women and men of the Canadian Armed Forces. Our support for them is always unwavering. Thank you for taking the time to speak with us today about the additional funds that we need to support them in the work that they do. And I'm glad to take your questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Minister. Just to aid in how we're going to set the tone here, the Minister has another commitment after. Sir, I'd like you to stay as long as you possibly can, but to get through this, we're going to need an hour to get through the formal questions. I'd like everyone to get a turn. If anyone sees this, please wrap it up in 10 seconds. That includes people answering the questions so I can get on to the next question, and everyone will get a chance. And please keep your comments the best you can to focus on what we're talking about here, which is Sup B for FY 16-17. Having said that, Mr. Spegman, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Good morning, Mr. Sajjan. It's nice to have you here. I'd like to thank you and your team here assembled with you this morning for your important work and your service to our nation. And I'd like to start out by asking you about Operation Impact, our effort in Iraq and Syria. It's a topic of great interest to me. I've spent a significant amount of time on the ground in Iraq, but more importantly, it's a topic of interest to all members of this committee and increasingly to members of our constituencies, residents of our constituencies. In Mississauga Lakeshore, my riding, people ask me quite regularly about updates on the effort that our women and men are engaged in on the ground. I must say that I'm quite proud of the work that we're doing as Canada to help Iraq and Syria find their ways forward, and equally importantly, to help those people that are displaced by this prolonged conflict. There's an overall commitment of $375 million that includes the global affairs component, and our component for DND is just over $140 million. And I'm wondering, Minister, if you could give us an update to start out, just how things are going at the moment on the ground in Iraq and Syria, how Operation Impact is unfolding, and then I've got a few more specific questions after that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the question. When we looked at the situation in Iraq before deciding on what type of capabilities and assets to put in, we took a very thorough approach, not at the current fight at that time, but what was it going to look like in the coming year, which is currently. So the direct request was on intelligence assets and trainers, and not just any type of trainer, very specific to the ethnic breakdown and the complexity of what Iraq is, as you know very well. So first of all, the intelligence components that we put in, it wasn't just about doubling the capacity, it's about putting in the right type of intelligence, getting a fusion center in place that's going to allow for that intel to be put into a proper packages that go through a very rigorous process. And that process has gone extremely well, and it has allowed the coalition commander a much needed intelligence capability for decision making and targeting. The other aspect also is the training. It's very critical that the right type of groups were trained and at the right time as well. So as the other cities were being taken starting earlier in the year, there's a lot of work that we needed to do with our allies with respect to training for the North. And you can see the fruits of that labor now. So as we're now actually about to liberate Mosul, having those right groups was very critical, and making sure that no additional tensions were created. And that leads me to the ministerial liaison teams. That whole government approach that we were trying to take here is having a tremendous impact. The ministerial liaison teams that is led by a Canadian general, and working directly with the Ministry of Defense and the Interior has allowed for the sequencing and some of the situational awareness to go very well. But keep in mind, military solution is just one aspect of things, and a lot of other work has gone behind the picture. The political situation is equally important, and so the work that my colleagues have done, not just in Iraq itself, but in the region, has had an impact. And now we need to work very hard to making sure not just the liberation of Mosul, but the political aspect and stability remains.
Minister, it's fair to say then from your comments that relationships on the ground, be they military, be they political, be they relationships in broader civil society in Iraq and Syria as the scenario evolves, are absolutely critical, and that we're deeply engaged in building those relationships.
Absolutely, and that is essential for anything that we do around the world. Building those relationships, having that ability to have a much deeper understanding is allowing us in the North to have that success that we see today.
Thank you for that. Minister, I'd like to ask you a question about our air assets that are involved in Operation Impact, and particularly the Griffin helicopters and also the Auroras. Could you make some comments on that?
Yes, I mean, the Griffin helicopters, when we put those in, we wanted to make sure that our troops had all the necessary resources there. The movement of personnel and equipment is essential. It saves a considerable amount of time, but also from a force protection aspect, it is absolutely critical when our troops don't have to use the road that often. Even though there hasn't been any type of a significant IED threat, we didn't want to be taking any risk to that, and just making sure that our troops had the resources. Our air assets, our Aurora, I mean, they have been doing great work from day one. But I actually want to highlight is the air refueler. That has actually gotten significant kudos because of the reliability of our air refueler. So when it comes to very important missions, I was told that they usually come to Canada because of the reliability of our air refuelers.
Minister, on a different track, how important is the role to hospital in our efforts in Operation Impact?
Well, when we were looking at the situation, and as I had my regular counter ISIL meetings with the key contributing nations of 13 of us, we always assessed the situation and made adjustments. And there was a direct need to put some medical personnel, hence the reason why we took this role on. We have tremendous ability for it, and having a role 2 capability with our personnel for a certain period of time has given, eased the burden on the coalition.
Thank you, Minister. On the force protection side, I know there's a $6 million request for funding specifically for the area of force protection, and there's also an effort to work with NATO on counter-IED measures. To what extent are those funds going to be applied to Operation Impact and that effort with NATO to reduce the potential harm from IEDs?
When it comes to missions, all those assessments are always done way in advance. I mean, making sure we have all the right tools, regardless of where we go. Those threat assessments are done, and but I can have the Vice talk to the direct aspects of those things.
And I apologize to you for I'm unable to answer the specifics of where that money is going to be spent in the context of the mission, but it is. I will take that on notice and get you an answer as soon as
It's fair to say then that force protection is definitely an aspect of Operation Impact.
Absolutely.
Okay.
What specifically that line item is being allocated to, I can't say, but unquestionably, as the Minister has indicated, everything we do has a robust force protection element to it, and that is both at the individual level and also at the operational level in terms of how we ensure that the components that are there can actually look after each other.
Thank you for that, Chair. I think that's.
And Minister, we're going to have to move on to Mr. Bazan's next question. Mr. Bazan, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Minister and officials for joining us today. First question I want to ask relates to Op Impact, and I sent you a letter, Minister Sajjan, on November 10th about some of our troops that are based in the Air Task Force in Kuwait, and we have 300 plus troops there. 15 of them are at a U.S. air base, Camp Refjan, and they're not getting the same danger pay or income tax considerations as the rest of our troops in Kuwait. Are you committed to fixing this in equity and making sure that they get the same pay and benefits as all our troops that are in Operation Impact?
Absolutely. In fact, there were some even additional challenges when I first came in and when I first visited. We were able to address some of the direct things that were under my authority, and also directly dealing with and getting the support of the Minister of Finance. But the specific ones that you're talking about, there is some work that the military has to do with the Treasury Board as well. But you can, we are actually working through this to making sure that the complexities of based on how this is done, to making sure there's more equity for our troops when it comes to the deployments.
Look forward to having that rectified. In your opening remarks, you make the commitment to responsible spending, and you also, in the SUPs, there's $3 million going to the defense procurement strategy. Is that money being used for the replacement of the CF-18 fleet? And is the sole source of the Super Hornets responsible spending?
I'll take the latter portion of the question for this Super Hornets first, and then for the DM ask the more detailed questions. I can assure you, when we looked at all aspects of the fighter replacement, and looking at what we needed to do, where the risks were, where the timelines, looking at how transition is going to go in terms of personnel, we are committed to replacing the entire fleet with an open competition. And that's going to be starting at the early of when the defense policy is released early next year. And then we're committed to investing in the current fleet to making sure that we have that right capability. But I didn't want to take any type of chances or risks of not meeting our commitments. And the capability gap that we have talked about extensive is real. And this is going to cost more. And to me, yes, the investment into the Air Force as an interim 18 Super Hornets that the Minister of Procurement will start discussions with Boeing on is absolutely essential to making sure that we have all the right tools for our Canadian Armed Forces, and the DM can answer the other questions.
Because I only got so much time, but on the Super Hornets, how much are they going to cost?
The costing of it will only be determined once the discussion has started. It's too premature to be able to give you an exact number just yet. Based on the work that we have done, we have rough ideas with it. But the thing is, what we want to do is making sure the negotiations can happen properly, so that we can get the best deal for Canada, get the best equipment as well, and get the right benefits.
But isn't this like writing a blank check to Boeing, and you're starting the negotiations without even knowing the price?
No, we want to have proper negotiations so that we can actually be best stewards of that purse and have proper negotiations so we can get the best deal for Canada.
We know. Spot, are you expecting them to be about the same ballpark?
You can't. Each aircraft and how you get it is much different. You can't just look at one aircraft. Each nation has its own abilities and requirements, and we have our own requirements. And once those discussions we've gone through and we have the right the costing, we will make sure that it is properly shown to you, to Parliament, and to Canadians as well.
Now, as you're aware, Lieutenant General Hood, Commander of the Royal Canadian Air Force, was before Senate Committee earlier this week, and he made a comment that he hasn't been privy to any of the discussions on the replacement of the CF-18s or the policy change on the number of planes needed for NATO NORAD missions. Why has General Hood and the leadership of the RCAF have been pushed?
Point of order on the table, Mr. Garretson.
Stop the clock.
I think that the questions today should be related directly to the supplementary estimates, and I would ask you to rule that that's the case and ask the member to...
Point of order?
I think on that, initially, the way you linked the question back, you were heading down the right track, and then we just kept going down that road.
We're down that path. And
well,
been answering
I think
questions.
My opinion on this is that initially we were, the way you worded the question, you were okay, and now we've just driven into the...
So let me reword
So I'm gonna sustain his point of order, and I'd ask you, Mr. Bazan, to get back on to sub B, please.
Just before you start the clock again, just to make sure that the Minister and I were having a conversation on the Super Hornets, which we started off about responsible spending. I'm still on the issue of responsible spending, which he has in his opening comments. And
point of order, Mr. Chair.
And just I'm on.
You're debating.
No,
You're debating a
I'm
ruling
getting
of the
back
chair.
to the point of order.
You can challenge the ruling of the chair, but you can't debate it. So if you want to challenge his ruling, challenge it. Otherwise, let's move on.
So all of you again.
James, there's been a ruling.
Okay, let's go on.
Please focus on.
I'll remind. Start the clock, and I'll just remind the committee.
You have the floor. You have the.
You don't have power to censor, and page.
You have 2 minutes and 15 seconds, Mr. Bazan.
Okay, let's go on. So on the issue of responsible spending, there is this whole issue surrounding how much more, and you talk about infrastructure of air bases and military bases across the country. Is there going to be a change in infrastructure needed to support the Super Hornet fleet and to operate this interim fleet and a mixed fleet now because of just purchasing 18 Super Hornets?
The infrastructure investment is necessary to improve all aspects as we move forward with the Canadian Armed Forces. This is a necessity regardless. And when it comes to the aircraft, the permanent regardless of what aircraft is selected for the permanent fleet replacement, will require some infrastructure in investment moving forward, and so that will be taken into account.
But because of that, making the Super Hornet sole source, which breaks the promise for an open fair competition, you're now essentially biasing and prejudicing the next selection because of the infrastructure needs for the Super Hornets. It's going to be the Super Hornet that's chosen in the next round.
No, It's not going to prejudge that decision. That open competition is going to be just that, a proper competition at the end of it. We've been part of the Joint Strike Fighter program for a very long time, and the same argument could be made there. What we have committed to is a proper open competition that we are not going to be cutting corners on, to making sure that the right aircraft is selected, but the internal fleet that we're purchasing is absolutely necessary to fill the gap and making sure that we have the right.
My final question I wish to ask is related to the replacement program for the CF-18s and all the staff that are tied to that program that have been forced to sign non-disclosure agreements. Now, why would you take this unprecedented move, 235?
Like, we're still driving down the road that we just talked about.
You know, the
It is not. This does not have to do with the supplementary. And you have
defense procurement. The defense procurement strategy includes the CF-18 replacement secretariat, and that's
James.
no,
you were just there was a point of order on the table. We talked about this. You said you get it back on track, and you're not.
You can try to censor.
I'm not trying to. James, these are the rules. On O'Brien Bosch, page 108, it clearly tells you what we need to do here. I gave you some latitude, and you've been asked to stay on topic, and now we're going down a different road. You have 15 seconds left. Would you like your time, or would you like me to move on to the next person who has a question?
I would leave it up to the minister if he wishes to answer that about the non-disclosure agreements.
Yeah. I'm not going to get involved with how you guys operate the committee here, so I'll leave that up to the chair.
Mr. Garrison, you have the floor.
I'm always open to discussion.
Mr. Chair, I am going to have to say at the outset, we're discussing the supplementary estimates for 16-17. That's the current fiscal year, and the question is whether these are adequate amounts to support the needs of the military. So I think your ruling is in fact mistaken, and I'm going to go ahead with the questions that I intend to ask. Thank you very much, Mr. Minister, for the commitment on infrastructure and particularly the cleanup of contaminated sites. It's very important in my riding, CFB Esquimalt, where for many, many years the Navy did things that perhaps would regret having done, and now there's some big cleanup costs, so I do appreciate that. And also the attention to the facilities on land, because many people working in the Canadian Forces are working in substandard facilities, and we have lots of problems, certainly locally, with asbestos in some of those buildings and things that need to be done. So we've got a backlog of that maintenance that needs to be done, so I welcome that commitment here. One of the things that just in the recent Auditor General's report, in terms of talking about planning, I'll just read from page 2 of the summary of that report. He said, National Defence must plan above minimum needs so that it has sufficient equipment available to respond to changing circumstances. So one of my concerns when you're talking about the Navy is that the shipbuilding strategy started out as a minimum, what we needed at minimum to meet our commitments. And now it tends to be talked about as a ceiling, that's as maximum we can get for the Navy. And so given those comments by the Auditor General, I think it kind of reinforces my concern that we not see the shipbuilding strategy as the total of what the Navy needs, but as the minimum of what we need to keep the Navy current.
I couldn't agree with you more. We cannot be planning the Canadian Armed Forces always at a minimum. Our men and women deserve to making sure that they have the right capability, the right infrastructure, and the right environment for them to do their work. That's why the Defense Policy Review was extremely important, and we've gone through some very detailed discussions with experts, with Canadians, and I appreciate all the input that all of you have provided and has been taken into account. So whether it's for the Navy or even the Air Force, we are not looking at planning for a minimum. And hence, the getting back to the fighter replacement. Hence why we're purchasing 18 Super Hornets. We're not going to plan for the minimum, and the Navy also included, but. We need to go through a very thorough assessment to making sure that we can look at not only creating the military for what's needed today, but also for the future. But until the Defense Policy Review is released, I can't say too much to that.
Thank you very much. One of the things I don't find in the supplementary estimates that I want to ask you about, and that is additional money for recruiting. And so, again, what the Auditor General just found is that there's a significant shortfall and the Canadian Forces remain under strength. And the Auditor General concluded that by 1819, Canadian Forces were unlikely to meet the number of people necessary in the forces. Since 2008, there were a reduction of about 20% of recruiting positions. 13 recruiting locations were actually closed. There's been a reduction, I know, in the kind of traveling centers that often went to First Nations communities. And so my question on the recruiting is that I don't see anything in the supplementary estimates, but it seems to me there's a great need to provide some more resources to recruiting to meet those targets.
Absolutely, there is a need, and what you just stated there was the challenge that I had coming in, and to then when resources are taken away to ramp up, it actually is even more complex to do that. So one thing that we have done, we will be investing in recruiting more from the attraction side, from the training side as well, and retention is also critically important. But that has been one part of the defense policy review that we have looked at. Certain changes have already been made, especially when it comes to the reserves and how we're bringing people in. We need to become much more efficient, but it does take resources to do so, and we're going to make sure the right resources are going to be put into recruiting to make sure we meet our numbers and targets, and put the focus on retention.
And again, not just the overall numbers, but there's been some concerns. I mentioned First Nations, rural areas of Quebec, places where we've traditionally drawn a large number of people for the forces have seen reduced recruiting hours available to do that work. And in particular, the Auditor General pointed out that while the military has a goal of 25% women, that there are no specifically funded programs or directed or targeted programs to actually achieve that target of an increase of 1% per year of women. So the Auditor General's report was very clear that he didn't find any funding and any specific programs to meet those targets for women in the military.
So when it comes to what a lot of what the questions that you have has been looked at with the Defense Policy Review, to making sure that we, our government, are committed to increasing more women in the Canadian Armed Forces. We're committed to having more diversity as well as we look at retention and taking care of our troops while they serve. So there's been a significant emphasis put on this for the Defense Policy Review. It's going to require resources as well, and we're going to be investing into this. But I look forward to presenting a lot of this, because it's a critical piece to the success of the Canadian Armed Forces.
We don't have it in the supplemental estimates this year. If it's in the defense review, then it's probably not in the budget next year, and that gives us a 2-year delay when we're already falling short of these numbers. So. No.
There's a significant emphasis have been made towards attracting and recruiting. And do you want to be able to talk to the resources?
Yes, there was $26 million this fiscal year just for recruitment. It was in the main estimate, so it was in the budget of the department. That's why there's no supplemental ask for it. But certainly the chief has put down a very firm target about the 1% increase per year over the next 10 years to get to 25% women representation in the forces. And I'm sure, and the Vice can speak to this, that the Armed Forces are going to have to put in place mechanisms and programs to achieve his target.
Yeah, to the essence of your question, we have sufficient resources in the current plan for the remainder of this fiscal year. What the Minister is describing is a number of internal machinery of recruiting changes that are underway and that are going to be implemented in the next couple of fiscal years in order to achieve the very targets that the Auditor General is referring to. It will be a more comprehensive plan. We are well aware of the issues surrounding the mechanisms by which we actually attract targeted groups, demographic groups. And so this is an area of future investment, but to the specifics of your question, that's why it's not reflected in the supplementary estimates.
I'm going to give the floor over to Mr. Fisher. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll try to stick to Sub-Bs. I see there's funding in the Sub-Bs for federal contaminated sites. I remember when I was a municipal councillor, one of the biggest struggles we had brownfield sites sat there vacant and unused for years because people wouldn't put the investment in to clean them up. So can you provide some details on this funding and maybe the government's policy towards these sites? I'm thinking specifically the roles and responsibilities of D&D when it comes to the assessment and the remediation of these contaminated sites.
Sure.
Happy to. So contaminated sites is a government-wide program. So Treasury Board Secretariat manages a large reserve to fund contaminated sites. They assess priorities according to criteria across all departments. So in the SUPs, we are looking for money to continue to do that work. The key projects we're going to be doing this year, we're going to be spending about $240 million over the next 3 years. And this year, Esquimalt Harbor is a big project. It's about $40 million. Five-Wing Goose Bay remediation, about 19, and then some other smaller ones. So the way the program works is you follow we're responsible for our contaminated sites, the Department of National Defense. So we go in, we will do an assessment to see exactly what contamination is there and what the best measures are to clean it up. And then Treasury Board will provide its funding to tackle the most priority, most contaminated sites first. And we work our way through that. So it's a strong commitment to try and clean up a lot, but there's no question Defense has a fair number of those sites to work on.
Okay, so is that land that DND is planning on keeping? What happens if land is transferred to Canada Lands? For instance, Shannon Lands in Nova Scotia was transferred to Canada Lands, not cleaned up, not remediated, left for them to remediate. Is that, when we're speaking about the projects that we're funding right now through the SUP-Bs, is that just land that DND is keeping, or do we have a responsibility on land that we're transferring or selling off to the private entities to clean that up beforehand?
Yeah, maybe I'll ask Jamie Pitfiller at ADM Infrastructure in terms of particularly even Shannon Lands, how that transfer and what responsibility we retain and what gets done.
Thank you very much. So as part of that deal with Canada Lands, they're responsible for the cleanup, and before they did anything or would do anything with it, they would clean it up. When we hold the land, if we intend to move it on to somebody else or to a different organization, we would either clean it up or they would clean it up as part of the deal, and the cost would be included in that transfer.
Would the cost be something that would be decided on once the level of contamination was agreed to?
Once it was assessed, yes, the cost would become clear, but the deal would specify which party was to cover those costs.
Okay, so the minister spoke to $19 million in transfers for land sales. That has nothing to do with a contaminated site? No. Okay, perfect, thank you. So our government's spoken to a commitment of improving our infrastructure. How is D&D contributing to the broader goal? Can you tell us about, you spoke to $36 million, and then you spoke to jobs and communities. Can you talk a little bit about some of the infrastructure investments that D&D is planning with these SUP-Bs?
I'll give the wider picture from the opportunities that investment infrastructure obviously creates for our communities, and then pass the question to the DM. As part of our wider government efforts on investing in infrastructure, the Canadian Armed Forces has a lot of infrastructure that needs to be improved upon, whether it's from our hangars to our various bases to also our housing as well. In those communities, when we invest in the infrastructure improvements of it, it actually has a direct impact, an economic impact for the communities as well. So we're taking that into account while we look at making significant investments in our infrastructure, because in some places.
Sure. So in the budget, this past budget, the government announced about $3.4 billion for a lot of federally owned infrastructure. So D&D will receive about $200 million of that over this year and next. So this year's portion will be about $30 million for defense projects and about $170 million next year. That includes, for example, $50 million on housing for the military. So we'll be making upgrades, improvements to housing on bases for members of the military. We've got money for armories in several provinces, and about $106 million for defense infrastructure for the forces, live fire ranges, airfields, hangar improvements. So it's a sizable extra bump of money on top of what we would normally do in our base budget.
Gotcha. Okay, so just recently, Minister, we just completed the Halifax International Security Forum from the 18th to the 21st of November. I was unfortunately not able to be there for that. This is a major, major event in my province, and I'm happy to see that there's funding through SUP-Bs for that. Is that just for the one that passed, or is there plans on investing some of that money in next year's event? Is there a plan to continue that in Halifax?
For the Halifax Security Conference, I am, when I first came on taking this role, was very happy to support it because I knew of the reputation of it. It was started by the previous government, and I think it provides a lot of added value, not just for Halifax, but for Canada's reputation as well. So very impressed with that. The funding that we have committed to funding it, but we have to now always making sure that we do make the right investment. We'll be in discussion with the president on this, to making sure that how can we create, making sure that this forum is sustainable, because it does add a lot of value. We had the largest U.S. CODEL attend this year.
Excellent. I assume that's my time, Mr.
You probably don't have time for a question and a response.
Gotcha.
So we'll leave it there. Thank you very much. We're going to move to 5-minute questions now, and the first one goes to Mr. Ryu. You have the floor.
Monsieur le Président. Bienvenue, Monsieur le Ministre. Je pense que vous serez...
Welcome, Minister. I'm sure you won't be surprised by my question coming from the riding of Saint-Jean. In the supplementary estimates, we see item 49, that there is money for military colleges, Royal Military Colleges. Is there money to prepare for the arrival of future university students at the Royal Military College of Saint-Jean?
As I mentioned earlier, I think it's for us to be able to recruit the best, and being in a bilingual country and the importance of French for Canada, that, as I mentioned, it's important for us to invest in RMC in Saint Jean. There is a much wider plan in place, but I want to work out some of the details of it before actually stating. But as I stated, we are committed to making sure that it gets the university status that it once had, and that it is going to be sustained.
I'm glad that the commitment is being maintained for the Army in general, but also for the riding of Saint-Jean. Another subject that is of interest in Quebec is the Davis site. There is a contract that was granted to create jobs for the auxiliary oiler replenishment. Do you believe that commitments will be respected, which means being able to give it to the Navy in 2017, and how will this interim solution allow us to have the 2 new replenishment ships?
That we're asking for the internship is important. When I talk about that capability gap that leads to a capability loss, this is that one aspect where we were faced with a decision of bringing in intern capability. I think the project is going well. Time will tell, but it is absolutely necessary that the Navy has this interim capability while we get the joint supply ships. But the Vice can speak more to that.
Au sujet du projet.
When it comes to the interim project at Davie, Mr. Fenn can talk about the details of the project, but we are confident that the deadline will be met and that we'll be able to put that interim capacity into service at the end of next year. When it comes to the macro level needs, as the Minister said, the idea is not to replace one with the other, but simply to address this capacity gap during the construction of the replenishment ships in Vancouver. Mr. Finn, briefly, when it comes to the deadlines at Davie, we are working closely with them. They are up to date for the moment, and they're very open to communication. And when it comes to the vessels being diligent Navy, or rather, the services in place will be ready at the end of 17, and the joint ships, they will be built the same way. We are about to start construction in 16 to 18 months. The contract was for 5 years and possibly to be renewed for 5 years. Is there still an intention to apply that clause? Indeed, it is a 5-year period, as you mentioned, with the option to renew for 5 years afterwards for options that could be implemented. The plan established is to ensure interim capacity during construction. We're working along the same deadlines, but it gives us a certain amount of flexibility, if required, to continue with interim capacity if necessary, as is the case in our plans. Thank you. One more question?
Question and response. I'm going to have to move forward. I'm going to give the floor to Mr. Pullis. You have the floor.
Monsieur le Président, merci.
Mr. Chair, thank you. Mr. Minister, we're talking about SUPs. We're talking about $142 million for Operation Impact. Let's talk about the hospital. Fabrice de Pierrebourg, a journalist, mentioned that there have been horrible scenes in Iraq. Civilians and children were injured in the middle of combat areas, and the hospital was empty. How much did the hospital cost? Who has the right to receive care in that hospital? Who decides who can be transported to the hospital to be cared for?
The role to a hospital is a capability that was put in for our forces. But when you have to take a look at all aspects of the situation there, and when I visited Iraq for the first time, and there was an attack that happened. So it's not just looking at what we provide in terms of role too. We have to look at the holistic picture of the Iraqi security forces, the injuries that they're taking civilians. In the north, they do actually have good hospitals there. So, for example, let's put the role to hospital aside for a second. One of the biggest aspects of what the Iraqi security force, especially the Peshmerga, what they had was not being able to do casualty collection points. And based on your experience, you know how important the casualty collection point is to be able to stabilize somebody before you put them in an ambulance. So they realized during that time when they took significant hits that they didn't have this ability. So we were able to send in the right people to start training them on how this is done, because they wanted to just quickly send them on to the hospital. But as you know, somebody may not survive on their way. So we looked at all aspects. It's not just about number of injured. It's about how that treatment is going to be done. So the Iraqis, for the Iraqi security forces, we have a certain responsibility as Canadians within that area. We are fulfilling that. The hospitals there are there for the coalition. But those type of decisions are made on the ground, and they look at things. For us to be able to judge exactly who should go in there would actually hinder their ability. But the coalition itself did look at all aspects, especially when it came to displacement that was happening there.
Je comprends. Le point de vue opérationnel, c'est que le général.
I understand that from the operational point of view, General Vance mentioned that civilians could be treated at the hospital, but currently we see that there are civilians who are dying. There are people being put into body bags, and nobody's being treated at the hospital. And I was just wondering about the cost for Canada. Are we being useful to Iraqi civilians? That was the goal of my question. Talking about the budget, we're talking about budgets today. The government mentioned that we're going to spend $450 million for the mission in Africa. Given that we're going to Mali, what part of the $450 million is dedicated to Canadian forces? And in the current budget, March 31st, 2017, what part of the money will be invested in training the troops that are going to be deployed?
It's not in these subs, but I can talk to you about the peace operations mission, which I've mentioned before. We have a commitment as a whole of government approach of up to $450 million and up to 600 personnel. Decision exactly where we're going has not been made yet. There is a critical role for Canada to play in conflict reduction and conflict prevention. Because when it comes to peace operations, what's happening in that part of the world, it's not happening in isolation. What's happening in Iraq is having a direct impact on what's happening in Africa there, including what's happening in Europe with the migrant crisis, direct impact. We are taking all this into account and making sure when the decision that is made that Canada, whether it's the military contribution, the development, and the diplomacy, is going to have the right impact, and the investment that we have committed to is there. But we will always need to continue to reassess and once the decision is made, we'll make sure that it is explained thoroughly what the costing is well.
When it comes to operations and planification for $450 million, are there sums that were already included in the defense budget? But you mentioned operations, Mr. Minister. Why the United Nations? Why not work with allies, as we are currently doing in Iraq? Why want to conduct operations with the United Nations when we know that it's inefficient?
The irony to all this is we are actually working with our allies. So when I go to the Contra-ISIL meetings talking about Iraq, it's the same partners who are going to be working with when it comes to the United Nations. So the United Nations is an organization that conducts peace support operations. But the same members that I operate in, whether it's going to be NATO, Iraq, of the counter-Daesh meetings, are the same partners that we work in peace operations. We do it in the United Nations context because it provides a multilateral environment to have a certain impact. But these impacts that we're having are not done in isolation. In fact, we actually have solidified our relationship even greater because we are working more within a multilateral environment.
Mr. Pelosi, it's your time. I'm going to give the floor to Mr. Garrettson. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just following on the conversation that Mr. Spegman had started with respect to Operation Impact, do you have a sense as to where that's going into the future and what that could potentially cost?
Well, before we, in terms of the cost, we can't have a determination, but I can tell you, we have looked at our involvement even before we made the decision of where things need to go. The military portion of the operation is one aspect. It buys you time to look at to deal with the real problem, the political situation that's there. So a lot of the work that I've been doing with my counterparts is also focusing on that political piece. That's why we pushed for, and it was accepted, to have the military liaison teams that are working within those governments. So as the liberation of Mosul it takes place, we're also working on to making sure that the unity remains, because that after the work that's going to be done after is going to be absolutely crucial to making sure that there's a stability. And these are not my words, but what I'm about to say here is, if we don't get that piece right, we don't know what the great grandson of Al Qaeda is going to look like. So we do need to have a lot of focus on the development, the displaced folks that are there, and the political situation is going to be essential. And how we support Iraq and the region is going to be critical. But we're not going to do it alone. We need to be doing it with our coalition partners.
What is the role of special forces in that?
Right now?
Yeah.
So there's they're in a devise and assist function. They have trained certain units up to a very good level where they can then conduct operations on their own, and we've seen the great impact of this. The Mosul operation wouldn't have been possible if it wasn't for the great training that was given in the advise and assist function for the Peshmerga. And so once the operation is complete, we will then do another assessment of where our military needs will be. The goal is always once the success is there, is to do less with the military and start bringing in more of the development and the governance work that's going to be absolutely crucial.
Thank you. Just turning to the some of the transfers that are going out in terms of, there's a number of transfers that have been requested, and I noticed that three. Transfers these are transfers from other organizations, and then I have one that's going out. There are three in particular that are from other organizations to help support research at RMC. I don't know if you want to answer that or one of your officials, but I'm curious if you can expand on that. And is that something that takes place, is commonplace for that to happen? And what more specifically would the funds be used for?
Yeah, so the granting councils under the Ministry of Industry, Science, and Economic Development, they run programs that fund chairs in universities right across the country. So it'll be an application process. They'll choose the best chairs, and it provides funding to a university to have a very esteemed professor for a certain amount of time to do work in an area, biotechnology, and so on. So the Royal Military College, like other universities in Canada, is eligible to apply to that program. So they would submit applications to either the Social Sciences and Humanities Research or to the Engineering Science Council.
And so that money's coming in as a result.
So it's coming in. So they're like a recipient, like every other university.
So it's not
in
necessarily
Canada.
a regularly budgeted thing. It depends on the application
They would have
process.
to apply. They're going to compete against all universities in the country.
I also noticed, albeit it's a relatively small amount, that just under $100,000 is being transferred out to shared services. And in particular, it's going to core information technology services with Canada and missions abroad. Can you explain that?
Sure. So shared services provides, as you know, the computer infrastructure for the whole government. So when we put people in missions abroad, our defense attaches, for example, shared services has to provide the computer and the hookups and the technology for that person. So they get to bill us for that cost. So that's $83,000 to reflect that we would have people overseas that need a computer.
Okay, gotcha. And my last question.
You're out of time there, Mr. Harrison. Sorry. I'm going to have to give the floor to Ms. Gallant. You have the floor.
Thanks, and if I have any time, I'll share it with James. Minister, when our troops leave op impact for home, what is in place in terms of decompression? We can't expect our troops from going from the front line battlefield to trimming the Christmas tree at home in just the span that it's going to take to get from Iraq back home.
Absolutely. That decompression is essential, and I've gone through a number of times. I'll let the Vice talk to the details of it. But I just want to also take the opportunity as we look at the operations that we're conducting now and into the future, we need to be able to continue to learn how the decompression and what works and what doesn't, and continue to evolve, but also for when they come back home as well. And as we also talk about post-deployment, we need to also look at pre-deployment as well. So it's going to be a much bigger look at this, to making sure that we give all the tools to the Canadian Armed Forces that they leave healthy and resilient and come back healthy as well. Thanks.
Yeah, so the actual mechanism is coordinated between Joint Operations Command, who are employing the forces in theater, and the units from which they're generated back home. And so they all have the same standard. They all go through a decompression, but it's different depending on what specific part of the mission they've been on, what rotation cycle they're on, and who their host of origin is. So if the air components go through a slightly different process than the special ops folks go through, and
have time someplace where they can talk to people they need to talk to and get
exactly
back
as the minister said, based on our extensive experience for over a decade of doing this. Yes, ma'am.
So once Daesh is driven out of Mosul, what plans are in place to go after, on the part of Canada in Raqqa, to go after them?
Sorry, I didn't hear the last bit.
So what plans are in place to go after Daesh once they're driven out of Mosul to Raqqa?
For
our troops,
what
plans are in place for our troops?
Right now, we have no plans for this. The situation in Syria is extremely complex. If you look at right now, if you want to talk about Syria in general, you've got Russia's involvement. You've got Turkey as well. It is extremely complex. Right now, it is not the right time to be sending Canadian troops into Syria, into Raqqa. Our efforts right now are in Iraq. If the situation in Syria does change, we will always assess a situation based on consultations with our allies. But right now, we do not have any involvement or intend to have any involvement in Syria.
Okay, for the purposes of expenditures in Sub B, was anyone from the Canadian Armed Forces or D&D required to sign a non-disclosure agreement?
Sorry, for sub
For
Bs?
expenditures in Sub Bs? No. Okay, and James, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So just looking at, there is, in Vote 1B, there's a transfer to support joint research grant projects. What would those grant projects entail, and would they be in support of the replacement of our CF-18 fleet?
Which transfer are you referring to specifically?
Vote 1B from National Defense to Natural Sciences and Engineer Research Council.
I can speak to that.
$192,000.
Yeah, there's $192,000 this year. None of them, as far as I know, are related to the CF-18s. What they are we will give money to NSERC to transfer to universities or others to do grants in areas of interest and priority to us.
In Vote 5B, there's transfer of national defense to a number of different government agencies for responding to and providing advice to the Government of Canada's public safety and security policy imperatives. Was any of that security policy related to the need to increase the number of fighter jets available for Defence of Canada and North America?
To the best of my knowledge, so we manage a program that on behalf of the government. Other departments submit applications, so it's for research in the areas of national security. So as the money's going to the RCMP, Natural Resources, Food Inspection Agency, Nuclear Safety Commission, so they wouldn't be doing, as far as I know,
and
any
then
research
also under
related
1B, the Defence Procurement Strategy, there's $3 million there. And in that Defence Procurement Strategy, does that include the Super Hornets?
Well, not explicitly, but what the money is for is in the Defence Procurement Strategy, Industry Canada was to set up an office to study defence analytics and for value-added propositions related to defence procurement. That was never funded previously. It was in Budget 2016. So that money will go to industry to set up that shop. Industry will be involved in doing the value proposition work related to fighter procurements, but it's not explicitly for that purpose, no.
And that's your time. Thank you for the answer for that. Ms. Romanado, welcome, and you have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and my apologies for the delay running from one meeting to another. It's a real pleasure to see you again, Minister, and to your colleagues, thank you so much for being here today. My colleague across the way actually touched on one of the subjects I wanted to question regarding NSERC and SHIRC transfers. So I understand the NSERC transfer for joint research grant projects is for regular universities doing research on behalf of the DND or in areas of interest. Now, with respect to the SHIRC and NSERC transfers into, I see that they are for research chairs at RMC and managing a research enterprise at RMC. Can you elaborate a little bit what you mean by the research enterprise at RMC, and if any of this research chair money will also be flowing to the Collège Militaire Royal in Saint-Jean?
We already discussed that a bit earlier before you came.
My apologies.
So, no, that's all right. So RMC applies to the program, to the granting councils. I don't have the list of exactly what the chairs are, but we'd be happy to provide it to you. And whether it's all in Kingston or there's a chair in Lac-Saint-Jean, I'm not sure, but we can get you.
There is going to be a small amount of money that goes to Saint-Jean in those estimates, but the bulk of it is going to RMC based on the program that the Deputy Minister described earlier.
Okay, thank you. Now, with respect to the $6 million allocated towards funding to improve security for Canadian Armed Forces operations and personnel, we had a briefing in camera regarding security of our bases and so on and so forth, so I can't discuss what was actually discussed, but is this in relation to our military installations here in Canada or also abroad? If you could elaborate a little bit what that is.
Yes, I'll take that one because one of your colleagues asked the question. I misunderstood the question in the context of how it was asked. I thought it was related to op impact specifically, but in fact it is about an ongoing security program to basically make not just our physical facilities, but all of our security processes more robust here back in Canada. and we spend approximately $23 million on an upgrade program. There's other expenses as well, and what you're seeing, that $6 million is specific to this Subs B process to add on to those security initiatives that you're referring to. And to clarify your colleague's question, it's not related, as I thought it was, to operations, which is why I couldn't answer his question earlier. Okay.
Now, I understand that the health and well-being and safety of our troops is the utmost importance for this government, and I'm delighted with that. In terms of the funding for personnel and so on that are talked about in this Sub B application, can you talk to us a little bit about the importance of increasing that support to our military personnel in terms of their health and well-being?
This is one aspect that has been very important personally to me and the Chief of Defense Staff, I mean all of us, because I've always stated is we end up talking about capabilities, ships, and purchasing things, but our number one capability are our troops, and investing in them and making sure that that we continue to evolve. We can't just take one strategy and say, hey, we've got it. We got to have a structure in place that's continually learns to evolve, and that we can continually change. And we're doing that now. A lot of these detailed answers will come out of the Defense Policy Review, which I know all of you had a hand in. But regardless of what's going to be decided, that is going to be a key component moving forward. So we're not just talking about next year. We're trying to talk about is what type of support do our personnel need all the way through into the future. And another aspect we're also addressing is the families as well. What we find is that for somebody to be effective at work, the family needs to be doing extremely well. So one aspect of things is making sure that the regular force who have to get posted regularly. Losing a doctor is difficult. Finding a new doctor is not easy. So we're looking at programs in place to look after these things. I'm going to be having a discussion with the Canadian Force Liaison Council with the great business network that we have of how can they assist with maybe providing companies that are out there to kind of ease the burden of finding new jobs when people are posted is as well. So this is going to be a significant focus for us moving forward.
Okay.
That's your time, Mr. Romano. 3-minute question goes to Mr. Garrison.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. I'm going to ask again about something that I don't find in the supplementary. That's about additional funding for training. And again, the Auditor General's report pointed out that part of the problems for retention in the Canadian Forces were delays in training. And I want to ask then very specifically about peacekeeping training. And despite my Conservatives, my colleagues' lack of confidence in UN peacekeeping operations, I personally know some have been very successful. Certainly UNIMET in East Timor was a very successful mission. So that while there's a mixed record, there are great successes out there. My concern is that under the Conservatives, that peacekeeping training was cut back and was allowed to sort of wither. We had the elimination of the Pearson Peacekeeping Center. And my concern is about wherever we're going in Africa for peacekeeping, it would take the same preparation. And so is the training being done? And why is there nothing in this supplemental budget to promote further peacekeeping training for these upcoming operations?
Again, when we look at the peace operations and how we're going to be looking at it into the future, part of this is also going to be on the decision that we make for peace operations. Discussions are ongoing with our allies. Canada is going to be hosting the next peacekeeping summit as well. The training aspect of things is not just about opening up a center, sending a few people here. We need a comprehensive approach to look at things. We need to look at the challenges within the UN. And there are significant challenges and challenges that they recognize. How do we assist in that? Bringing new innovative ways of peacekeeping, because today's peacekeeping is not the peacekeeping of the past. We need to look at how to bring as a whole of government strategy. Military looks at look at sending peacekeeping troops and how the training is done. How do we integrate a whole of government strategy? What does it look like? And how do we demonstrate that as a nation? How do we bring other nations together into this? So there is going to be a comprehensive approach that we're going to be putting forward, but we want to evolve it into something that's far more than just looking at training peacekeeping troops or having a training center in Kingston. But we are going to be looking at a wide aspect of how to move forward, capacity building, to troop contributed nation training, and how do we integrate some of the development work properly into the areas that we do select.
Well, I appreciate the high-flying answer, but I guess my concern is about we're going to ask Canadian Forces members to go and do difficult and dangerous jobs, and we have to make sure that they have both the equipment and the training they need to do those jobs. So I'm disappointed that we are not moving on the training at this point. Waiting for a larger strategy wouldn't really affect the training you would do.
So one of the things, well, when we make the decision on where we're going, then that's when the detailed planning also starts in terms of the type of training that needs to be done. The type of equipment is actually that's needed to making sure that it meets the necessary requirements. So that'll be a decision is dependent as well. A lot of work has been done on that, but I don't want to get ahead of myself before we make a decision moving forward. But Vice, if you want to talk to some aspects of it.
So again, not unlike your previous question, sir, the training that you're referring to is happening inside the line organizations that deliver training today. And it will be supplemented and modified as required based on the specifics of the missions as that operational planning and government decisions unfold. But we are continuing to do that type of thing. And in particular, the Army has an ongoing component of their routine training that includes many of the traditional elements of peacekeeping operations as you would have understood them in the question. Thank you.
Thank you.
I mean, I know I'm sensitive to your time commitments, so I'm going to suspend for a couple minutes to let you leave, and we can resume with the officials. Thank you for coming today.
Thank you.
Okay, welcome back. We have a quorum, so I'd like to get started with the remaining time we have left. We can start the round like we did before. We'll run out of time, or I can reduce the questions to 5 minutes. I know there wasn't a will to do that last time, but I'd ask if we could do it this time. It's up to the committee. Okay, sounds good. So we'll resume in the same order. With the 5 minutes, and I would again, for everyone, just try and keep it to sub B. If you link it back to sub B, that's why we're here. For people who have questions off topic, there's question period. There's other formats that we can discuss. And I would ask everyone to keep that in mind as they formulate their question. And starting off with a 5-minute question, Mr. Spengeman, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Gentlemen, I'd like to, and Madam, I'd like to take you back to Operation Impact. And so at the moment, the mission is going to be extended until the 31st of March 2017. What are the factors that are currently at play that would dictate or drive further extensions? And what would be the associated funding requirements, some of which may be reflected already in the supplements, but others may be new? Are there a lot of unknowns? Is there planning for post-Daesh? And if so, what capabilities, as we see them currently reflected and funded in the SUPs, could be applied in the next phase of Operation Impact that are not already being applied?
Deputy Minister and I will tag team the answer. I'll speak to the evolution of the mission and the potential requirements going forward. In the last round, the Minister spoke to the nature of the mission, and clearly, as the situation in Iraq, particularly in the context of Mosul, the liberation thereof, as that evolves and we get a better sense of what the emerging needs are of the Iraqi security forces themselves, we'll have to look at the nature of our current contribution to the coalition, and that the number of options related to how we either reinforce certain things that we're doing or potentially shift forces or shift the focus. As it relates to any specifics, it really is too early to tell, and it is such a dynamic and fluid situation on the ground that it would be premature of us to be speculating as to what we may or may not do. Ultimately, as the current mandate comes to its end, we have to come back to government and provide advice as to how we would or would not want to extend the mission and what that extension may or may not look like in the context of how the operational situation is evolving. And then as it relates to the costing of that, well, that would be another step in the process.
So in the last budget, there was money provided. There was the $360 million for this year's operation. And keep in mind, when we put somebody into that theater for a year, there's always follow-on costs for the next 2 years after to replenish stores, supplies, munitions. So the money in the SUPs is for this year for the mission to run to end of March. When the government takes a decision on whether to extend the mission and to do whatever, we'll put in a new request, and the budget would announce money for that for next.
Thank you for that. Under Operation Iraqi Freedom, that takes us back into the mid-2000s, the U.S. forces actually had personnel, mostly officers in the field, who were reservists and who were equipped to advise the Iraqi government then on questions of governance. And under the current allotment of $147 million to Operation Impact, do we have capacity to potentially walk down that avenue to not only provide military advice, but to provide through our reserve forces, should they be deployed in theater, governance advice to elements of the executive branch of the armed forces that may involve policing, that may involve military training, but also increasingly questions about multi-level governance, civil administration, and those kinds of questions?
So in the current footprint of Operation Impact, we've actually set conditions for that conversation through the ministerial liaison teams that the minister referred to earlier. It's a small team of serving officers at the moment. The extent to which that could evolve, the extent to which that could be supplemented by reservist. Those are all valid questions that go back to my previous response in terms of how we see this evolving as we potentially shift from a more kinetic set of actions to a more supportive set of actions in terms of advising.
Yeah, and just to add on to the Vice's comment, so there's advisory team in Iraq advising the Iraqi government, and also the budget allows for a similar kind of capacity building team in Jordan and Lebanon as well to help with kind of capacity building in the region, help those countries cope with it.
Good to know and helpful. To take that one step further,
I'm going to have to give the floor up. You've got seconds left, so we won't get a question and a response. I'm going to give it over to this side. So either Mr. Poulos or Ms. Gallant, you have the floor.
Chief Bosmeyer, DND is requesting authorization to transfer $5.9 million to CSE. What is the rationale for the transfer, and how will it be spent?
Thank you for the question. CSE, as you may know, has a long history of supporting the Canadian Armed Forces, and actually we're very proud of our contributions to help the men and women of the Canadian Armed Forces in their operations. This is a transfer that's being asked for this year, and it will allow us to continue to support the Canadian Armed Forces in their operations.
Okay. So what type of support to the military operations will CSE be providing?
Well, this would be under our foreign signals and intelligence mandate, so Part A of our mandate.
Pardon me?
This will be part of our foreign signals intelligence mandate under Part A of our mandate.
Okay, and I'll be transferring my question, the remainder of my time to Mr. Poulos.
Thank you.
You have the floor.
Dans le discours.
In the opening statement of the minister, there's a supplementary budget of $147 million for Operation Impact, but in the documents I see $142 million. What's the correct number?
142, j'imagine.
142, I would imagine.
Oui, il s'agit de 142 millions de dollars.
Oui. So,
Okay.
employee benefit plan, $5 million.
Ma question dans le montant de 142 millions.
In the $142 million, you mentioned that it's mostly going to go to salaries of the forces, but salaries are already paid. I don't understand why you say the money is going to go to pay salaries. So you're asking for an additional budget to pay for things that already exist. Could you please explain to me how that works?
Merci beaucoup pour la question.
Thank you very much for the question. When the minister talked about salaries, he was referring in reality to attributions to hazard pay. The hazard bonus, yes, is included in there. But there's not $142 million of hazard pay. Could you please give me a breakdown of the overall amounts? Because we're talking about equipment. I'm wondering if the weapons that we're buying are included in there.
Donc, sur le 142.
In the $142 million, we have money, as you said, for allocations, $27 million, which is given out to pay. There's $90 million to pay for the travel of our personnel when they have to return to the country and come back. And military vehicle allowance, that's $10 million. And then the commercial allocation for certain vehicles, $4 million. Costs for camps to support our individuals, $1.3 million. And we have money for equipment for our special forces, $10 million. And the rest is part of an agreement that we have to buy equipment and weapons. I know that there was a problem when it came to weapons because from the beginning, there was the question of buying. I don't know what type of weapon we were going to be buying and giving. I would like more details on that. The amount is $9.5 million.
Just the amount was set aside for small arms, basically, so to give to the Peshmerga. So when we're training them there, they have small arms. One of the conditions of that program was that the Iraqi government had to approve in writing that it was okay for Canada to provide that equipment. Mm-hmm. And that just came through very recently, like I think last week. Yeah. So the actual transfer of any equipment hasn't taken place yet.
Puis les armes, c'est
And the weapons, C7, C8? Not exactly those types of weapons, but yes.
OK.
Ajouter, M. Paulus, oui, c'est des armes que nos forces spéciales.
These are weapons that our special forces use in order for them to conduct training. But of course, we also procure weapons and munitions so that at long term, afterwards, once we leave, they're no longer able to use them. In the model, as such, we try to ensure that long-term use is possible.
There's not much time left for a question and a response, so I want to move on to Mr. Garrison. You have the floor.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. I noticed in the SUPBs there's an amount for reinvestment of revenues from the sale and transfer of real property. And I guess since my time on City Council locally, we've always been concerned about the divestment of D&D property. And of course, naval commanders, I won't name anyone specifically, that I dealt with in the past were always concerned that they don't make more waterfront land. And so we remain concerned about divestment of land as a short-term way of raising revenues when there may be long-term needs down the road. And so I guess my question is really about the time frame that's used in making those decisions to declare property surplus.
Thank you for the question. These decisions are driven totally by the operational requirements of the forces. So, what
time frame?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. So, I think 5 to 20 years would be reasonable. But we have been hoarders, and so the thrust at D&D right now is to release land that we're not using.
I guess I fall on the hoarder side because for the various obvious reasons that navies are very constricted and certainly in both Halifax and Esquimalt, there's not a lot of place for them to go if they have future needs.
If I may, we are both extremely cautious and realistic in the appreciation of the long-term requirement for land. And in past years, we've been a little too quick sometimes to divest of land, and in some cases, we've had to actually go back and reacquire or try to reacquire some land that we divested of. To Mr. Pitfield's answer, we do have a process. It's part of a robust long-term capability planning process, which typically uses a 20-year planning horizon, and the real property component of that is integrated into those discussions. So that's the kind of cycle you're seeing. So many of the divestments that are reflected in the SUPs now are indicative of decisions or at least advice around the divestment of property, which predates many, if not all of us sitting at the table today.
Right.
Right.
I also have a concern about the treatment of tenants. A lot of this land has been leased. And when you go to divest the land, it has a big impact. And in my riding, probably the most important issue right now is Royal Roads University, which was DND's university before, has now been declared surplus. And we have a university sitting on a very long lease, and they're trying to make decisions about infrastructure investment and trying to use some public-private partnerships. And there's a great deal of concern now for them as the tenant about the insecurity of both of their lease and who might eventually be the landlord. So how do we take care of those interests of what have been long-term and very good tenants of public property?
Thank you for that question. So I met 2 or 3 weeks ago with the president of the university when he came to Ottawa. And as we discussed the future of that big piece of land, which is a very valuable piece of land, also the subject of high interest from a number of First Nations. So we are trying to make sure that stakeholder groups, particularly Royal Roads and 2 of the First Nations, are very aware of what is going on, and so communications is very good. The lease, it's a 99-year lease. They're kind of at year 85 in that. We respect that lease, and whatever happened to the land, the lease obligations would go along with that. But we're years away from resolving this.
Thank you.
Yield the floor over to Ms. Romanato. You have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you, and if time is remaining, I will share it with my colleague, Mr. Spangerman. So I wanted to talk a little bit about infrastructure. I heard earlier that part of the infrastructure funding that you were talking about does involve some of the PMBs. I mean, sorry, I'm trying military speak, the housing for our military. When I was visiting Bagotville, we saw an interesting model where it's a sort of a little, I don't want to say a campus, but a little ecosystem of a community around the base in Bagotville. And it's something that I'm curious if that's something that you're going to be putting funding into in terms of getting more housing, military housing for our military, because you did mention infrastructure, because we see that as a problem every time that they're deployed into new, with movements, that it's difficulty for the families to find affordable housing and so on and so forth. So if you could elaborate a little bit on that, some of the initiatives that you're making. Thank you.
Thank you. So National Defense has 12,500 houses that are for the use of military members and their families, and that's scattered across the country. Not always in the right place, according to requirements. And so we're in the midst of using operational requirements from base commanders and from the 3 environments to determine where do we need the appropriate number of houses, and then we're going to try to rebalance the portfolio. So that's the big answer. National Defense got through the budget this year, received $50 million to upgrade the infrastructure quality of our houses. So that would be new construction. It would also be renovation. We have spent significant amounts of money over the last 5 years in the range of $500 million. And so the impact on the portfolio has been quite good. We are trying to use what used to be the demand was for 4-bedroom houses for big families. Now it's more 1- and 2-bedroom apartment-style accommodation. And so we are doing that. So we're trying to follow the techniques of modern markets, if you want. The one that you're speaking about in Bagotville, I'm not sure if that is government-owned or if it's the private sector. We are seeking to rely on the private sector to provide housing of the right quality and the right affordability, which is possible today. It wasn't possible in the mid-'50s, so it's a different model that we're trying to move towards. But at the end of the day, the welfare of the troops and their families and the affordability of it are and the what we provide through houses, in terms of neighborhood and that kind of thing, are all paramount.
Okay, thank you. And I'll share my time with my colleague.
Thank you, Mr.
Stegman, you have the floor.
Back for one more round to Operation Impact, please, to Mr. Forster and Admiral Norman. $375 million total in funding, $233 for Global Affairs, $142 for DND. How important is their work to yours? How important is your work to theirs? And could you talk about the civil-military planning process, both inside the government of Canada, but also on the ground in Iraq?
So
and I'm not giving you a lot of time to answer.
No, and I'll give you as short an answer as I can, because I think that the deputy can speak better to the coordination in the town. But on the ground, absolutely essential. The minister alluded to it in some of his previous comments and his responses to questions. The success will come from integrated solutions that is not just planning here and execution from here in the capital, but actually on the ground where all of the efforts of development, diplomacy, and security and defense are lashed together in an integrated plan. And that's what we're trying to achieve on an ongoing basis as we not just conduct our current missions, but as we plan future missions.
Yeah, just on a bit bigger picture, that when the government came to office actually and looked at Iraq, they asked us to come back with more of a whole of government package. And so you saw it in the renewal of Op Impact. There was a lashing up. We're seeing it even more so as we look at options for peace support operations in Africa. You're seeing us, you're seeing foreign affairs on the diplomatic side, you're seeing international development, you're seeing public safety perhaps on the policing side. Like it's a much more integrative, where defense is part of a whole of government approach. So it's kind of a growing trend, and it's a really good thing, actually, I think.
Appreciate that. Thank you both.
That's close to 5 minutes. We'll just keep going down the list. We're going to move into 5-minute questions again because we can knock those out. Mr. Ryu, you have the floor.
Merci de votre présence.
Thank you for being here and for the valuable information you provide. It's always appreciated. The Arctic is an important issue, and it's going to have a significant impact. I can see in the supplementary budget there's $2.6 million for natural resources in order to support the training center of the Canadian Forces in the Arctic. I have 3 questions, and I'm going to ask all 3. And perhaps you can answer in order. Up until now, how much money has been spent to build the Canadian Forces Training Center in the Arctic? And in the training center, do we have the 3 elements of the Army, of defense rather, the Army, Navy, and Air Force? The question here about the $2.6 million for the training center in the Arctic, in Resolute. It's in the city of Resolute. Most of the military activities there are ground-based. It is the Land Army's training center. But regardless, it's not far from the sea. It's accessible to the Air Force. It is there to support training efforts in the area. That includes the Rangers as well. And the 2.6 is a combination of about $1 million to support the NRCan program. The training center is part of the NRCan Center, which is why there's a transfer of resources. There's also support for buildings, operating costs, and some money for improvements for the period that is covered by the budget. Total cost for the center, it was built by NRCan, but it's about $25 million up until this point. Can we expect that with global warming and the importance that the Arctic is going to represent, will there be more operations in that center? Yes, and we must also take into account facilities at Nanisivik, which is being renovated, under construction, will be available to the forces towards the end of 2018. In the geographical context, in regards to distance from the Arctic, they're relatively close to each other. Therefore, in the future, there will be more and more activity in both facilities and elsewhere throughout the Arctic. I would imagine that it's mostly for the Army that training is being offered. I'm guessing for the Navy, your ships will be offered training as well. Yes, sir. Like with all other installations, regardless of the location, all of our bases are available to all of the forces, whether it be the Navy, the Army, or the Air Force. The majority, whether one is the majority, there are always other components that are doing training there. There is no base that is exclusively for the use of one element or one service in the Canadian Forces. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Much, Mr. Bazan, you have the floor.
There's $22 million going to the interim auxiliary offshore replenishment ship. Can you give us a quick update on where we're at and whether or not we're on time to deliver this capability back to the Royal Canadian Navy?
Yeah, maybe I'll ask Pat to do it, but we discussed it a bit earlier, but yes, generally it appears to be in reasonable shape. So.
Thank you, sir, for the question. Yes, we're on track. Again, it's going to be a service to be delivered in the fall of 17. The Federal Fleet Services, as the company is not called, with whom we are in contract, for whom the shipyard in Davie is a subcontractor, very open. We're there monthly and have a sort of third party overseeing it. They are telling us quite openly they're still, I'll say that a lot of it's the kind of the disassembled part of the ship, the Asterix, starting to pull it together. And at the end of the winter of 17, They'll be bringing over what we'd call a major piece of the structure. The house, which has been built in Scandinavia, will be coming over and put onto the ship. So they are reflecting that there is risk ahead, as there is in anything this complex, but very open and currently, notwithstanding some schedule risks that we see in all of our projects, on track to be able to provide that service to the Navy in the fall of 17, sir.
Okay, good. There's $9.5 million going to the Middle East strategy. Can you tell me where that falls within the purview of national defense as to what staff is there from Canadian Armed Forces, from national defense?
Sorry, $9.5 million for...
Well, on list of transfer programs, there's contributions and support to the Middle East strategy in supplemental Bs. So just wondering what that program is and who is, from national defense is participating in that. Like how many staff are assigned to it?
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, I'm not sure which item we're referring to, because I don't see that one. So,
anybody?
We're not seeing it in any of our documents.
It's in the Library of Parliament documents here. It's actually on page.
Sorry, this is.
What's page number here? 247.
This is vote 10. It's for the transfer, the $9.5 million we were talking about earlier for Operation Impact to purchase small arms and ammunition.
Purchase more.
Small arms and ammunition.
It just applied to some of our allies, I suspect?
That's correct.
Yeah. Okay, so it'd be for the Kurds? Okay.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, Mr. Chair, I know that you gave some leniency to Mr. Garrison and asking questions that were kind of outside of what's actually in the supplemental estimates.
Actually, the committee gave him that latitude.
Okay, although there was one time you intervened on me. I would ask that some leniency here, because I think Canadians want to know more about these non-disclosure agreements that have been signed. We did talk about the replacement of our CF-18 fleet, and everyone that's assigned to that project has had to sign non-disclosure agreements. And I would like to get an answer from our officials why that's necessary.
And before you run down that road, I'm prepared to allow it, but again, the committee has to be. We're here for a very specific reason. You know the rules as well as everybody else here. So if we want to deviate and NDA start going out of the lane,
tied to the replacement
if everybody's okay with that, that's fine. But if they're not okay, I would rule that it's not in order. So if everyone can indicate to me.
I mean, it's not an. It's a procedural matter. You're the chair. It's either procedurally correct or it's
not. I'm asking you if you want to give Mr. Bazan some latitude. If you don't,
Can I make the argument, though, that we did talk about the replacement of our CF-18 jets, which is on the table.
The question's been asked and answered. If you're asking for some latitude from the committee, then you can go ahead and ask.
It ties to that, though. It is part of.
Okay, but that's all right. So I just need an answer. Mr. Garrison, are you willing to change your position on that or no? And then if you.
I don't have a position on it.
Okay, I'll ask the question then, Mr.
All right,
Chair.
proceed.
That these non-disclosure agreements are not a normal function of government. We do have a National Defense and National Defense Act, as well as the Security of Information Act. Does the non-disclosure agreements go beyond that? And does it at all violate the rights of any of our staff that's provided to them under the Public Service Disclosure Protection Act in the event they want to be a whistleblower?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Actually, they're not uncommon. On major procurement projects, when you have your procurement officials are dealing with sensitive commercial information, financial information provided by proponents or suppliers, as well as national security information, it is not uncommon to have a non-disclosure agreement for staff working on the project. In terms of the work being done this past summer, where government said we want to go out and update our information from various suppliers, there was an interdepartmental Tiger team pulled together from various departments: Defense, Public Services, Justice, ISED. And in going out to the companies, as well as to our allies, we were going to be collecting commercially sensitive financial information, as well as classified sensitive security information from U.S. and other partners. So It was the non-disclosure agreements were signed by the members of the team to make sure they understood their responsibilities in protecting that information.
And that's your time, and that's your question, and that's your answer. And I'm going to give the floor over to Mr. Gerritsen. If you have a question, you have 5 minutes.
As it relates to the overall budget being just over $19 billion, do you know offhand what that represents in terms of percentage of GDP?
For this year, I don't. I believe for the previous year, Canada was about 0.98% of GDP in terms of its defense spending.
Last year, but you don't know.
For this year, I think it would be roughly about the same, but I haven't done the updated calculation.
Okay. And the department had new funding. This is according to the minister's statement at the beginning. The department had requested new funding of just over $250 million. Do you have a sense as to what that is in terms of a percentage of the overall budget?
Well, ask Claude to do the math. It's 250 million on 19 billion, so it's...
Okay, no, I can figure that out. Okay, that's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Does anybody else on this side want to pick up? You've got about 3.5 minutes.
Question period in 10 minutes.
Then I'm going to, just a second here, if that's, I'm conscious of the time, so I want to give you guys the opportunity to run your time out. If you've got a question, then I want to give everybody an opportunity to talk. Then I would next move over to Ms. Kalan and then Mr. Garrison.
Just a quick question. With respect to the transfer going to the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission, what specifically is that being used to pay for?
Let me find that one. 21.
Questions.
Oh, okay. That's under the security program. So again, we kind of run this program on behalf of the whole of government. So it's departments apply to us to do research in areas of national security. So they can apply. We rate the proposals with public safety, and then we're kind of the fund holder of the funds. On the Nuclear Safety Commission, it's require an elemental analyzer to measure oxygen, nitrogen, and hydrogen in ore materials. I'm not sure that helps. Doesn't make me understand it exactly, but that's the project. We can give you some more information on it.
Thank you.
Like.
And I guess James wants to use the rest of the time.
That's left.
Okay. And just all I have is I want to move a motion in relation to the supplemental estimates that the committee requests that the parliamentary budget officer provide it with a general analysis within 21 calendar days after adoption of this motion in regards to the decision of the government to sole source the Boeing FA-18 Super Hornet for national defense. This analysis shall include, but not be limited to, the following items: the Department of Defense estimates on the cost of the FA-18 Super Hornet for acquisition, maintenance, training, and operations, life cycle costs, and the associated costs of operating a mixed fleet of fighter jets. The committee also orders that the Government of Canada provide the committee with electronic copies of the following: all documents that outline acquisition costs, life cycles costs, and operational requirements associated with the Boeing FA-18 Super Hornet, all potential industrial losses if the memorandum of understanding in regards to the Lockheed Martin's F-35J Joint Strike Fighter program were to be altered and industrial benefits were to leave Canada. And just on that,
for a quick second there, James, I'm going to suspend for a second and make sure this motion's in order. I'm going to discuss with this, and then I'll get back to you. Okay, after conferring with the clerk and pulling the book out to just make sure that we do the right thing for the right reasons, this motion doesn't cite B, or doesn't refer to back to Sup B, and there's a bunch of supporting documents that the clerk's saying that we would need, and because it doesn't relate directly to what we're talking about here, I'm going to rule this out of order, and you're welcome to table something similar in the future if you would like to discuss this particular bill. And to be fair, I think somebody else wants the floor, so I'm going to rule this out of order.
Can I just?
No, because I don't have time, and I want to make sure that I want to make sure that everyone gets a chance. This particular motion's out of order. I'm going to make sure that Mr. Garrison, then we accept that. Notice on, or motion on notice. That's fair. You can do that. Mr. Garrison, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'd like to move that the Standing Committee on National Defence reject the DND Supplementary Estimates B for 2016-17 on the basis of its failure to provide sufficient funds to meet the recruiting needs of the Canadian Forces, including targets for recruitment of women.
Okay, 1 second.
Can we have the text? Could you repeat it?
You want to repeat it first? Repeat.
Know what we're voting on?
That's because I hadn't heard from the minister and the officials. So
you have the floor. If you could repeat it for the rest of the committee.
I move that the committee
rejects. Here to help you with that.
Just
reject the supplemental estimates B for 2016-17 on the basis of the failure to provide sufficient funds to meet the recruiting needs of the Canadian Forces, including targets for recruitment of women.
Okay, on that particular one, these actually have been reported already. So this was an opportunity for us to talk to the officials and the minister. This has been reported, I believe, Tuesday, Monday. So they have been reported already. So it's out of order in the sense that it's already occurred.
So what you're saying, Mr. Chair, is that we missed the deadline.
Yes, that's correct. Is there anybody else? Can I get a motion to adjourn? All in favor?